Hello everyone, it's your friend, your boy, Jump Like the One and Only here with another exciting live stream. And in this video, we are going to be pitching our ideas for DC Comics series and stories. I've prepared 7 DC comic pitches, 2 are pitches for new series, and the other 5 are pitches for new stories. My DC Comics story and series pitches are going to be based off of the new DC Digital First Daily Comics, which at the time of this recording have just finished their first run of issue ones. So that's going to be my direct inspiration. You guys can pitch any ideas that you guys have for DC Comics, whether it be like series, stories, pitches, characters, you name it. I'll be reading the live chat, interacting with you guys. This is going to be a group discussion where we just kind of go nuts and we just share our ideas for the future of DC Comics. You can pitch ideas for like events, you can pitch ideas for like powers or bases or vehicles. Just let your imagination go wild. But I have 7 pitches prepared that I would like to share. And feel free to come into the live chat at any point with any of your ideas. This is supposed to be more of an interactive discussion style video. Okay, so first I'm going to go over my series pitches, and then I'm going to jump into my story pitches. So my first series pitch is for a team book called Monster Mash, and it would be a team up between Swamp Thing and King Shark. So the book more or less is about 2 half-human, half-monsters taking extreme measures to stop large corporations from destroying the environment and threatening the survival of everyone on Earth. The two don't always see eye to eye, but both agree that in a world of superheroes, no one else is taking a stand against the corporations who are destroying the world. The two will take on companies like LexCorp, Cord Tech, Wayne Industries, Star Labs, and Palmer Industries, which means our monsters duo will go head to head against characters like Lex Luthor, Blue Beetle, Batman, Cyborg, the Atom, and more. So that's my idea for Monster Mash. My inspiration for Monster Mash comes from the fact that in these DC digital first daily comics that are coming out, Swamp Thing in his comic has been heavily against companies who are hurting the environment. And then in Flash Fastest Man Alive, King Shark is also really big against like companies who are hurting the environment. And they both have that half human, half monster theming, and they both seem to have similar frustrations with big companies and a desire to help make the environment a better place. So I feel like it just makes sense based off of those like first issues to expand upon that concept further and team those characters together in their own book and have them go on adventures together. And really, for this like series pitch for for this series pitch for Monster Mash, you don't really have to make it its own book because Swamp Thing already has his own book where he's kind of doing stuff like this. But I think it would be cool if they incorporated King Shark into his book and if they worked together in order to try and do stuff. I feel like they would make an interesting team at the very least. The next series pitch that I have is for Ginny Hex, Unnatural Historian. Yo, Volt! Welcome to the stream. It's good to have you. How's your day today? Do you have any questions for your boy? And do you have any discussion topics you'd like to talk about on the stream? So this stream is called Let's Pitch Ideas for DC Comics. Essentially, we're just having fun pitching ideas for DC stories, series, characters, powers. If you have any idea of like any ideas for what you would like to see in future DC comics, feel free to just share them. This is more of like an interactive discussion based stream. Volt said, "Day's always good. How about you, man?" Oh, fantastic always. Thank you for asking. Um, but yeah, if you want to like share any ideas you have for like DC comic stuff, this is the place to do it. I just shared a moment ago an idea for a series called Monster Mash, which would be a Swamp Thing and King Shark team up book, since they're both like half human, half monsters who take extreme measures in order to stop large corporations from destroying the environment. So that was my first pitch. I had more details than that. I gave like a whole like elevator pitch description, but I did that at the beginning, so I'm not gonna redo it. But I wanted to get you caught up on the ideas that I've shared so far. And I also wanted to hear your thoughts on the concept of like a Monster Mash team up book between Swamp Thing and King Shark. So how do you feel about that, Bolt? The second series pitch that I have prepared, I have 7 pitches prepared, by the way. 2 are series pitches, and the other 5 are story pitches. And they're all based on what's going on in DC Comics right now. Like, it's based off of those digital first daily comics, those brand new number ones that we just finished reading this week. So they're all based on stuff that happened in those. At least my pitches are. You guys can pitch any DC idea you guys happen to have. It doesn't have to have anything to do with what's currently going on in comics. Volt said that actually seems like an interesting idea. He said Swamp Thing and King Shark have a lot in common. I'm glad that you vibe. I thought so too. I don't think the two characters would necessarily see eye to eye on everything, but I do think they'd be okay with the measures that they take with each other. Like, Swamp Thing isn't afraid to beat people up. He isn't afraid to like blow up buildings and stuff like that. He just doesn't want to kill anyone. King Shark, I think he doesn't want to kill people necessarily, but he'll eat them if they get in his way. Like, because I think he does straight up try to eat the Flash. But when he breaks onto that cruise ship in Flash Fastest Man Alive issue 1, he tells everybody to get out of the ship. He's not like, I'm just gonna eat all of you. He only threatens to eat people who, like, get in his way. So I think the two of them would work together, but I think on occasion Swamp Thing will have to hold King Shark back to keep him from killing people. But Swamp Thing, in his book, Swamp Thing New Roots issue 1, he also struggles with a desire to kill people. It's like a thing that grows in him and he has to remove it from his body in order to like stop him from killing people. So I mean they both have that in common too. Like I really do think they could work together well. Volt said King Shark eats off the heads of others. I mean, that's why Swamp Thing has to reel him back. And Swamp Thing could potentially kill like tons of people with his powers because he was able to make trees grow through a building in such a way to where it like tore the building apart. Imagine him doing that to like a person. You know what I mean? If he can do it to buildings, a person would be like nothing. So I think King Shark and Swamp Thing would have to watch each other to make sure that they don't like go over the edge. But I do think they could potentially work together to try and like take down these large companies in the DC universe who have probably at one point or another polluted the environment. You know what I mean? So as a part of my elevator pitch that I gave about Monster Mash, I mentioned that they could go up against like LexCorp, Cord Tech, Wayne Industries, Star Labs, and Palmer Industries. And the reason why I mentioned all those company names is because they're companies within the DC universe that are each connected to some big character in the DC universe that they could eventually butt heads with. Like I could see Swamp Thing and King Shark fighting Lex Luthor because maybe they're taking on LexCorp for something they did to the environment. They could be taking on Blue Beetle because maybe something Cord Tech did to the environment. They could take on Batman or really any of the members of the Bat family because maybe Wayne Industries did something to the environment. They could take on Cyborg because maybe Star Labs did something to the environment. And they could fight like the Atom because like Palmer Industries did something to the environment. I could see a lot of different like stories coming from this and seeing Swamp Thing and King Shark more or less explore the corporate side of the DC universe. Let's see, Volt said, I could see it being an interesting way to kind of create monster superhero groups. And he said, in Gorilla Grodd could be like their main enemy. So Gorilla Grodd, it's interesting about Gorilla Grodd. Gorilla Grodd wouldn't be against what they're doing. Like, I don't think he'd be opposed to these half man, half monster creatures pretty much like taking it to the man and being like, you shouldn't be hurting the environment. Because Gorilla Grodd least recently in comics, I think has been more obsessed with the Speed Force and trying to harness the Speed Force for himself. And I think the last time we saw Gorilla Grodd in comics was during a big Justice League event that was going on, where he was working with the Legion of Doom. So he's also kind of working with like a bigger group of villains and trying to help them with their plans. Because the Legion of Doom recently has been working with Perpetua, and Perpetua is like the creator of the multiverse, but she also is like this evil god, and she's trying to make the entire multiverse evil. Like that's like a whole thing that's going on right now. Um, so I'm not sure if Gorilla Grodd would care about like the Swamp Thing King Shark stuff. Uh, but if he was involved, I don't think he'd try to stop them. If anything, I think he would either not react to it or he would work with them potentially if their interests aligned with his in some way. Because Gorilla Grodd does seem like the type of character to me who might get upset at being betrayed by someone. So if Lex Luthor, who's like the leader of the Legion of Doom or whatever, were to cross Gorilla Grodd, so Gorilla Grodd's like, oh, he betrayed me, I want revenge. And then if Swamp Thing and King Shark were like, hey, we're about to fuck up Lex Luthor because he's doing some pollution stuff, I could see Gorilla Grodd being like, "Oh, you guys are gonna fuck up Lex Luthor? I was gonna fuck up Lex Luthor. Let's fuck up Lex Luthor together." And they like attack him. Though I guess since Lex Luthor is the leader of the Legion of Doom, let's say Gorilla Grodd is on good terms with Lex Luthor. Then you could have a story where King Shark and Swamp Thing are gonna pay a visit to Lex Luthor about LexCorp's pollution, and then Lex Luthor is like, "You thought I wasn't prepared for this? I summoned the Legion of Doom!" And then like Gorilla Grodd and like Brainiac and all these big name villains come to face off against like Swamp Thing and Killer Shark and like an all out brawl. That would be pretty cool. I think that would be dope. What do you think about that? Volt said, "That's an odd idea. How would one make an infinite multiverse evil?" So, the multiverse in DC isn't really infinite. So originally it had, well, it's weird to say originally. Since like 2010 or so, 2010, 2015, that range, the DC multiverse has had 52 Earths. And then recently, after Dark Knight's Metal, it had 53 Earths. But then there's also the Dark Multiverse, which is on the flip side of that. And the Dark Multiverse has an Earth for every one of your hopes and fears. But those Earths are temporary, and they eventually like just kind of are destroyed over time. It's really weird. But more or less, the way that universes are made in the DC multiverse is that there's the World Forge, and on the World Forge, new worlds are formed, and then they either rise out of the dark multiverse and join the Orrery of Worlds, which is like the normal multiverse, or they sink deeper into the dark multiverse until they cease to exist. And Perpetua during the big Justice League event was doing stuff like flicking worlds like marbles into each other and like making worlds crash into each other and destroy one another. So Perpetua more or less was like, you're either going to join our ranks of doom and just all be evil, or I'll straight up like flick your world and you'll just not exist. Just bam, like stuff like that. That event gets really crazy. And by the way, the heroes don't win. Like at the end of that big Justice League event, they kind of just walk through a door and it looks like they've entered like a different reality because there was a series of books. I'm trying to remember what it's called. I think it's called like Hell's Arisen. And one, like Hell's Arisen takes place in that world where the Justice League just kind of left. Like the bad guys won. Perpetua's like everybody's evil. Da, 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 da. And it's about like a group of villains who are trying to take down the Legion of Doom. Well, it's weird to say a group of villains. Essentially, well, I mean, there aren't any heroes for real. So yeah, kinda. It's weird. It's weird. But there's a world without a Justice League where Perpetua won and everything was straight. Dun. And then there's the normal continuity where they just kind of ignore everything that happened in Hell's Arisen. So it's really weird. All of it's weird. Anyways, Volt said, but yeah, I see what you mean with Gorilla Grow. Okay, ballin'. Hopefully, me talking about the multiverse stuff wasn't too confusing. It is really weird. I've talked about stuff like this with Ryan before, but DC's mythology can get really dense and really crazy really fast. Speaking of stuff that dives into DC's mythology, I have my second series pitch. So my second series pitch is for a series called Ginny Hex, Unnatural Historian. So the concept behind this series is Ginny Hex, the granddaughter of Jonah Hex, is hired to work as a superhero security guard of the Museum of Unnatural History. If you guys remember from Aquaman Deep Dives #1, that's where Aquaman and Black Manta have their big battle. So inside the Museum of Unnatural History are some of DC's that are some of the DC universe's craziest artifacts, magical items, and weapons. And villains from all corners of the world want something from the museum for their next master plan. And it's up to Ginny Hex, who has access to all of these crazy items, to keep these artifacts that out of the villain's hands. So that's my pitch more or less. Ginny Hex is a character that was created by Brian Michael Bendis shortly after he joined DC Comics after he moved out of Marvel, and her whole thing is that she's like, I'm like a cowgirl, and I'm like a teenager, and I have a trunk full of magical artifacts and stuff from the DC universe, and I just travel around with Young Justice and do Young Justice stuff. But I feel like now that the Museum of Unnatural History has been introduced so early into the DC digital first continuity or whatever, because these new comics that have been coming out daily on DC Digital First don't feel like they're a part of the main DC continuity. They feel like they're their own thing, and I kind of like that. And that's why a lot of my pitches are like based around those comics and what's happened in those comics so far. So I think they could really expand upon the Museum of Unnatural History thing, and it would be a great place for them to actually use Ginny Hex in her own book. Because so far she's a character that Bendis has made who's only ever been in other people's books. So this is like her thing, like magic DC artifacts. So I think now that the Museum of Unnatural History was attacked in Aquaman #1, I think this would be a good time for them to launch a Ginny Hex series that's like, well, the museum got attacked and it needed a superhero to protect it. But we can't hire like Aquaman to protect the museum because, Aquaman's busy. He's like a member of the Justice League. A matter of fact, we can't hire any of the members of the Justice League to protect the museum because they just have better shit to do. So they're like, we need a hero who isn't as busy as the Justice League, but who knows a lot about magical artifacts and how they work in order to protect the museum. And Ginny Hex would be like, magical artifacts from the DC universe is literally all I do. That's like my whole character. And then they'd be like, you're perfect, you're hired. And then that could be her solo book, and it'd be great. Volt said, ooh, I could see that going into a lot of ancient magic stuff. It would be cool to see that have join up with John Constantine. So I'm glad that you brought up John Constantine. When I was younger, I used to look at like the DC Comics Wikia because comic books weren't as immediately available. Like I had comic book stores in my area, but I didn't have like a car or a license, and I wasn't really old enough to drive at the time. And I would occasionally go to the comic book store, but I wouldn't go to the comic book store all the time. But I wanted to read more of the stuff that was actively happening in comics. And on the DC Comics Wikia, I read a lot of plot summaries for like the New 52 John Constantine books, which I still haven't actually read. I've only ever read those plot summaries. But based on those plot summaries, it seemed like John Constantine had this really big thing about how magical artifacts shouldn't just be thrown around where anybody can get their hands on them. And I think a big part of that plot was Constantine being like, yeah, not everybody should have access to these. I should put a stop to that. So I think John Constantine would be a perfect fit for this kind of thing. At the same time, I don't think John Constantine would support the idea of the Unnatural History Museum. I think his point of view would be like, this stuff shouldn't be here because people know that this place exists. And if people know that this museum exists, then it's vulnerable to being attacked by like villains or by like aliens or whatever who want access to this stuff. He'd be like, I need to have all this stuff because I can actually keep it safe. And I could see a storyline where Jenny Hex has to prove herself to John Constantine in a battle of like magic and wits to try and convince him that she knows what she's doing so that John Constantine leaves the museum alone. I think that would be cool. To be honest, I could see like a whole gauntlet of characters like that appearing and going, I don't think you're worthy to protect these artifacts. You either prove that you are worthy or I take these artifacts from you. I could see Dr. Fate doing that. I could see Circe doing that. I could see pretty much like any big name magical DC character who would have a reason to be like, I should be the guardian and not you, for them to have a fight like that. Circe may have been a bad example. I don't think she would roll up being like, I should be the guardian. I think she'd be like, those should just be mine and I'm gonna take them. So that fight wouldn't be like a, okay, you've proven yourself to me. I'm gonna back off. It'd be more and then afterwards you better call in Wonder Woman because Cersei's gonna be pissed kind of thing. Um, oh, but those are the only two series pitches that I had. But I do have five story pitches that I'd like to offer up to you guys. Volt said I could see Moon Knight in there too, but for different reasons. So, Moon Knight, I saw your comment in the live chat before I ended the last stream. I apologize I didn't read it on stream. I'm just working on a schedule trying to get all these videos written up and delivered to you guys. But you mentioned that he's like an unstable Batman. I'm aware that Moon Knight has like multiple different personalities and he's a little crazy, and that there's like a hint of like magic stuff with like the whole like moon god thing. Like there's a whole bunch of stuff going on with Moon Knight. Moon Knight is a Marvel character, so I could only see Moon Knight getting involved if it was like a alternate universe crossover kind of thing. So let's see, it's 6:52. Oh snap! I have like 8 more minutes or so before I'll have to end the stream. I just checked the schedule, and the next thing I have after this is I'm going to be setting up for another video about the comics that are coming out next week. So let me try and get through a few more of these pitches. Then Vol said, "Oh yeah, I get Marvel and DC mixed up a lot. No problem. I mean, when it comes to superhero universes, it's not too hard to get everything mixed up." So my first story pitch is Swamp Thing versus Red Ball. So in Swamp Thing New Roots #1, it's established that Swamp Thing is facing off against this corporation called Sunderland Foods, which are a series of food plants that are inadvertently destroying the world. They're essentially going to lead to like a worldwide famine, but they're completely unaware of this, and they're more or less just trying to make that money. Like they don't really care, to be honest. But Sunderland Foods is tired of Swamp Thing destroying all their food plants, so they want to stop Swamp Thing by any means necessary. In Swamp Thing New Roots issue #1, Sunderland Foods tries to like capture Swamp Thing and clone him, but that doesn't really work out. So my idea is for a story where instead of sending like normal goons to take on Swamp Thing, which is what they tried in the first issue of Swamp Thing, they send the supervillain mercenary Red Ball to go take on Swamp Thing. Now, Red Ball was a supervillain mercenary who appeared in Wonder Woman Agent of Peace #1, and he has the power to open portals to random dimensions, allowing him to summon all kinds of mysterious monsters from across the DC multiverse to take down his target. However, he can't control what portal he opens, it's always random. Um, but I think it would be really cool to see Sunderland Foods send Red Ball to try and take down Swamp Thing. Imagine Swamp Thing fighting like some of the craziest monsters from throughout like DC's history, or seeing Swamp Thing fight like brand new monsters that are being introduced into like the DC mythos. Like that would be really cool. Um, so I would love to see a Swamp Thing versus Red Ball story in the Swamp Thing New Roots series. I think that'd be really cool. My next story pitch, and by the way, let me know your thoughts on these story pitches. My next story pitch is Black Manta's Revenge. So, Aquaman Deep Dives #1 was all about Aquaman and Black Manta essentially like trying to settle their beef in like a fight. During the fight, Black Manta gets cursed and he now is like eternally hungry. Like he suffers the effects of starvation all the time, regardless of how much he's eaten. And I think if I was writing like for Black Manta or whatever, I would want to try and resolve that as quickly as possible, but in an interesting way. So I could see Black Manta getting the help of Cersei, who's like a sorceress who sometimes is like a bad guy that Wonder Woman fights, to help break the famine curse that he received from Aquaman. But Cersei's like, I'll only break that curse if you help me take down Wonder Woman. So Black Manta agrees, and Cersei gives Black Manta magical weapons to help him hunt down and kill Wonder Woman. And this idea would be for a Wonder Woman Agent of Peace book where Wonder Woman has to face off against a magically enhanced Black Manta. So it's essentially Wonder Woman versus the world's deadliest pirate, now with magic powers. I think that would be like a really cool book. It would also be a cool way to tie in the events that happened in Aquaman Deep Dives with the events from Wonder Woman Agent of Peace. Similar to how the last story pitch I gave was a way to tie in the events of Swamp Thing New Roots with Wonder Woman Agent of Peace. I only have, I have three more pitches. I also only have 3 minutes. Rapid fire pitches, let's go. The next pitch is called Parasite's Redemption. So in Parasite in Superman Men of Tomorrow issue #1 essentially was like, hey, I don't want to be a monster. I just need help. And then Superman's like, I'm gonna try and get you help so that you'll be able to like control your powers and not be a monster or whatever. So Parasite's Redemption is my idea for a follow-up story to that. So in this story, Parasite has received a special device from Star Labs to help him better control his absorption powers. He wants to turn his life around and to use his powers for good, but he doesn't trust himself to stay on the right path. Luckily, Superman has offered to take him under his wing and to help train him to become one of the world's greatest heroes. Can the Man of Steel and the reformed Parasite save Metropolis from Lex Luthor's latest scheme? And that's my idea for Parasite's Redemption as like a follow-up for the storyline that took place in Superman Man of Tomorrow #1. Okay, I don't know if I can get through all these pitches in time. The next pitch that I have is called Flash's Promise, and it's supposed to be a follow-up story to Flash Fastest Man Alive issue #1. So Flash promised King Shark that he would help put a stop to the pollution of a cruise ship in the first issue. So Flash quickly discovers that it'll be harder to keep his promise than he originally thought when he learns that the cruise ship belongs to Lex Luthor. When the Flash tries to out Lex Luthor for polluting the ocean with his cruise ship, Lex Luthor frames the Flash for a crime he didn't commit. Now, the Flash will have to use his experience as a forensic scientist to prove his innocence and to stop Lex Luthor's pollution once and for all. Again, that's supposed to be like a follow-up idea for Flash Fastest Man Alive. Also, feel free to let me know in the live chat what your thoughts are on these pitches so far. I have one more pitch. Final pitch. This one's called King Shark versus the Mutants, and this is also supposed to be a follow-up story to Flash Fastest Man Alive issue #1. Okay, so King Shark, shortly after the events of Flash Fastest Man Alive, discovers that the pollution from the cruise ship has caused sea life in the area to grow into rampaging mutant monsters. To make matters worse, these mutants are producing toxic waste that is causing even more damage to the ecosystem. Can King Shark defeat these dangerous mutants before they multiply and contaminate the entire ocean? And those are all my story pitches. Now let me read the live chat, and then after I read the live chat, I'm gonna have to end the stream and get started on the next video. I gotta write up like a script for it. Let's see. Volt said Jet, the fastest voice in the West. Volt said, I like them all to be honest. He said, I think the one I'd be most excited for is the Flash's Promise one. Ooh, okay. So I imagine that you really dig the idea of Flash um, actually like living up to the promise he made to King Shark and also him trying to prove his innocence. I like that one too because for one, I think Flash Fastest Man Alive has been like the best comic out of these new DC digital first books in the first place. And two, because it would be a story that focuses more on Flash using his skills as a forensic scientist rather than him just running fast to do a thing. So I definitely understand where you're coming from, and I do think that'd be cool. I'm not sure if that's the one I'd be the most excited for. I kind of like the idea of Swamp Thing versus Red Ball. I really like the Monster Mash concept, and I really like the Ginny Hex Unnatural Historian one. And then Volt said, yeah, it would be an interesting character development. I definitely agree with that. Also, we got one dislike. I'm sorry that you guys aren't liking the thing. I didn't know. Uh, but anyways, I'd like to thank you all for watching. I do have to end the stream for now. If you guys like this video, make sure to smash that like button, favorite, comment, subscribe, and ding, 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 ring the notification bell to be notified whenever you do these live streams. This is your friend, your boy, Jet Life One Only, logging out. Peace, guys. Chickadee.